to Friday, everyone. Thank you so much for pressing play on today's show. Thanks to everybody who stopped by our happy hour hangout last night. That was awesome, as always. Excited to have former Capitol Hill police officer Harry Dunn joining us, stopping by at the hangout last night. Talk about his run for Congress. Very cool. I have an awesome guest on today's show. He's becoming one of my favorite people to talk to. Colby Hall, who is over at Mediaite doing great work, always writing interesting things about how media is covering politics, especially, and more. Colby joins me at 11 minutes after the headlines. But there is a lot to talk about. Time for the news. And on Friday, a reminder that the Friday news is thanks to Ryan Gilliam, or Gilligham, or Guy Gel Gemi, whatever it's pronounced. Ever since 3 Fridays ago, he was the only listener, and he's been listening for 14 years. Hey, Ryan, to tell me how much he appreciated me doing the Friday news. So now I'm obligated to give him credit for me doing it. Thinking of you, Ryan, and everybody else that appreciates the news. Let's start with the big story yesterday, which I think has to be the news about the negotiations on any kind of legislation on immigration passing through the Senate or House. We learned yesterday, that apparently Republican leaders, at the direct request of the party's presumptive presidential nominee, the disgraced former president Donald Trump, had put the brakes on any effort to reach a compromise with Democrats on immigration policy. That's huge news, that they have stopped negotiating on immigration policy because they want to keep the issue a problem for Donald Trump to solve it. David Rothkopf writes in the Daily Beast, this is significant not just in terms of the benefits such policies might bring about, but because the Republican Party had previously made passing such laws a precondition for approving President Joe Biden's supplemental budget request, which includes aid for Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, and other vital security measures. Trump's rationale in blocking the deal is that he did not want to give President Biden a victory on immigration policy prior to the election. Trump and the MAGA right are apparently so committed to running on the idea that an inadequate progress has been made on immigration that they're willing to block any such progress. This, of course, is the kind of political logic, Rothkopf writes, it's so sick that it could only have come from the Republican Party, since they are, after all, the party that played a central role blocking the most sweeping immigration reform proposals in modern U.S. history, even though they were conceived and presented by a Republican president, George W. Bush. There is a lot to be said about this. I'll play a couple of audio clips about it, but this is really a huge issue. Disgraced former president's opposition to a border deal sinks it. Senators on both sides of the aisle have been working on this for weeks to negotiate a compromise on a border deal that would crack down on a surge of migrants and resume discussions over sending more aid to Ukraine. But yesterday, Senator Mitch McConnell, the minority leader who backed the deal, told Republicans privately that Donald Trump's opposition to it had made the prospect of its passage much more difficult. Lots to say about that, but a big story developing yesterday. And obviously, speaking of immigration and the border, I'm sure you're following what's going on in Texas if you aren't. And I'm not as closely following as I'd like to be, but I'll catch up on probably over the weekend. This is pretty crazy. What's going to happen? Who's going to win, the state or the federal government? We've been here before, and it could get ugly. So pay attention to what's happening on the border between the National Guard and perhaps, we'll see what happens with the state government in Texas. But that's pretty scary, what's going on there. We talked a lot about it at the Hangout last night. All right, let's get on, though, to other news. Plenty to talk about. The CIA director, William Burns, on his way to the Middle East to meet with Israeli, Egyptian, and Qatari officials to try to secure a deal to release the hostages held by Hamas and pause the combat. That son of a bitch, Peter Navarro, former Trump advisor who lied and spit in everybody's faces, was sentenced to 4 months in prison for defying a congressional subpoena. And that is hilarious. He went out and tried to give another press conference, and people heckled him, as they always do. And must be embarrassing to be him. That guy is the former chief of the country's soccer federation, the Spanish Soccer Federation, who kissed a non-consensual kiss of a star player during last year's medal ceremony. Well, guess what? He's going to be now tried over his non-consensual kiss. For a while, he wouldn't even leave his job, and now it's like criminal charges against him. I like that. What else do I have for you? Yesterday, President Biden vetoed a Republican-led effort that could have thwarted the administration's plans to invest $7.5 billion to build electric vehicle charging stations across the country. In issuing the veto, the president argued that the congressional resolution would have hurt domestic manufacturing as well as the clean energy transition. But the Republican conservatives hate progress. They hate electric cars. And it's preposterous because it's the most capitalistic idea out there, really. I mean, It's crazy, but that's how dogmatic they are. U.S. Senate committee approved legislation on Wednesday that would help set the stage for the United States to confiscate Russian assets and hand them over to Ukraine for rebuilding after the destruction of a nearly 2-year-long war. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee voted 20-1 in favor of the unprecedented Rebuilding Economic Prosperity and Opportunity for Ukrainians Act. Guess who the one was? Rand Paul. The only member to oppose this was Rand Paul. Loves him some Russians. Or, I don't know. I don't know why he voted against it. Maybe because he's a real kook. Huh. Well, last night at the Hangout, the great Kevin Richberg mourned the loss of NASA's Little Mars helicopter. It's flown its last flight. The space agency announced Thursday that the 4-pound chopper named Ingenuity can no longer fly because of rotor blade damage. It remains upright and in contact with flight controllers. Its $85 million mission is finally over. Apparently, it was supposed to only last a few weeks, but it lasted a lot longer than that. Let's see. What else do we have? Let's go to Oklahoma, where their superintendent of public instruction, a guy named Ryan Walters, announced he was appointing right-wing social media influencer best known for controversial libs of Tik social media accounts, to an advisory role in the state's Library Media Advisory Committee. That will allow her to help determine which books are appropriate for Oklahoma school libraries. So that is a crazy development in Oklahoma, and they will lead the way on banning books, is my fear. So if you're there, get out if possible. All is not well with the platform formerly known as Twitter. Since taking control of the site, apparently, Elon Musk has dismantled the platform system for flagging false election content, arguing it amounted to election interference. Now, his early election year attacks on a tried-and-true voting method are raising alarms among civil rights lawyers, election administrators, and Democrats. So look to that story at the New York Times, titled "Elon Musk is spreading election misinformation, but X's fact-checkers are long gone." All right, those are the headlines that I've got for you. Now I want to get to some sound, and a lot of it is relating to what I opened with on the negotiations over a border deal. Republicans rejecting any border deal unless they get everything that they want is one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it, of course, is the more obvious one. They don't want anything. They don't want a solution because it could be a good thing for America, a good thing for our security, and I guess a good thing for Democrats. And Joe Biden is the concern. Here's Gavin Newsom talking to Alex Wagner on MSNBC last night.
Mitch McConnell, I thought that was shameful, what was reported out, that he's just completely rolling over and capitulating. Don't even get me started with the weakness of the current Speaker of the House. I mean, they don't want a deal, period, full stop. They don't want a deal. They don't want to make this a quote-unquote campaign win for Joe Biden. It's just everything you need to know about the fraud that they're perpetuating on the issue of the border. They want to make this a political issue. Consistently, they have wanted to make it ever since there were a few brave souls with that Gang of Eight. If we all remember those black and white movie days.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember that.
And ever since there, they just walk away. They run away. The first day he was in office, not the next day. The same day he gets sworn in, he puts out a comprehensive immigration plan. And yet you didn't have a counter. They had no strategy in terms of the Republican Party, even combating that. They just wanted to kill it. They didn't want to debate it. They didn't want to engage. $14 billion proposal. $14 billion. That's his latest proposal to address their stated issue of border security. 2,300 new Border Patrol agents. Another 1,000 in addition to that to deal with fentanyl. Close to another $1 billion, $850+ million just for new technology. And then address some of the issues of backlog on asylum to address those that are here waiting for asylum claims. They won't touch it. They don't want to solve this problem. They want to use it for political purposes. And again, I say this as a border state governor. No one has to introduce me to this issue. Yeah. We're the largest port in the Western Hemisphere in the state of California. We live this. And I think it is a disgrace what the Republican Party is doing, what Donald Trump is doing. And this is hidden in plain sight. He sent out a tweet or some truth, whatever, saying, kill it. Yeah. And these guys are so weak. It's so pathetically weak, this Republican Party. And the new speaker said, oh, yes, sir, what else would you like us to do? We don't care about America. We don't care about our freedoms and liberties. We care about politics exclusively at the expense of the American people, because all we care about is winning for winning's sake. That is shameful.
That is shameful. Well said, California governor. Very, very well spoken, very passionate, very righteous, and I appreciate everything that he just had to say there. And unfortunately, I'm having a major computer issue pulling sound, and so I'm going to have to wrap that section of the news up. Plus, it's almost 1 in the morning. So I thank you for listening to the news segment. Sorry I couldn't do a little bit more. I'll figure that out by Monday. I promise you that. That's all I've got for you here on today's news segment. But now it's time to get to my interview, and it's a good one. Colby Hall is one of the founding editors at Mediaite. I love his stuff over there. Mediaite writes mostly a lot about political stories that are being reported out on cable television and other media outlets, and I love it. It's one of the most popular websites out there in all of news, and I just always like Colby's take. He's great on the show. He's great at talking, and he's a really good guy. We started with a little bit of personal stuff at the top. I always love for you to get to know guests. I like to get to know guests, their credibility, their kind of moral clarity, their judgment, their values. So that's always fun. And we did a little bit of parenting. Always happy to talk about our kids with Colby Hall. Follow him on all of the social media. Read him at Mediaite. Here now, my conversation with Colby Hall. There he is. Colby Hall, just told you all about him. Really excited when I get to talk to you. Really excited every time you post at Mediaite, and there's a lot to talk about. How have you been? Anything going on in your life?
My son is playing varsity high school basketball. My dog is about to get snipped, and it's January. So, the winter blahs are about to kick in, and, we're amusing ourselves to death with political media.
Well, that's great that your son's playing varsity basketball. Do you go to the games?
I'm the dad that is obsessively interested in his kids. Like me and one other dad text each other nonstop about zone offenses. I mean, it's a little pathetic, but it's great fun. And we're supportive. We're not like big yeller complainers, but it's stinky private school, high school basketball in Brooklyn. So it's not that big of a deal, but yeah, watching your kids compete is the single greatest thing. That's my definition of heaven. I love that more than anything. So I'm that guy.
I love it that you're that guy. I sense that you were that kind of dedicated dad and try to spend as much time as you're like me. I mean, I'm like that. Like I was going to say, try to spend as much time with your kid as your child will let you. It's hard.
100%.
It's different. Everybody has different relationships with their kids. I was really close with my dad and spent a ton of time with him doing a bunch of things. But my girls, it's hard to get them to hang out with me. And we hang out at home a lot. We're really close, but it's sometimes hard to get them to do stuff.
Well, I mean, my son is 16. He's a junior. And so I'm like 18 months away from an empty nest. And so I'm literally embracing every day because I don't know what I'm going to do without having my kids around. So I got a dog, and that will be the transition.
I just went through it. My daughter's a freshman in college, and we have one left, but one left sounds like just a couple of birds. That's what it is.
That you know of. There's probably little Dominics all over there.
I'm positive.
The 90s were a crazy time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they were really crazy for me to be in the friend zone, not having sex with other people. All right, Colby, speaking of sex, you wrote the words anal sex at the headline at Mediaite, and we will get to that. That's a tease. That's a tease for another story that you covered. Why was he writing a news story about anal sex? It's newsworthy, and we'll prove it in a minute. But first, I just wanted to start generally with the idea that we've been covering, and you've been writing about Donald Trump for 9 years.
Oof. Yeah. I mean, it's nearly a decade that he has occupied a huge footprint in the psyche of the body politic. And for better or worse, but I would say almost entirely worse, it's really been kind of a national nightmare, I have to say, for a variety of reasons, not least of which is that he is, I disagree with most of what he does politically and his populist faux bullshit, but I think my dog is bothering me, sorry. I think mostly he's undermined sort of the meaning of like what is meaningful and truth. And, he's taken a pro wrestling kayfabe approach, and he's got dumb people to follow him and believe in him. And I think it's been really a negative effect on the national discourse. And so I'm hoping against hope that this is the swan song and this is the end of the Trump political era, but we'll see.
How do you cover him in part of the issue is that he floods the zone with bullshit. We know that. We've talked about that, the Steve Bannon strategy, but he floods it on his Truth Social, where he puts out what the equivalent of a press release, just constantly, sometimes just ad nauseum in the middle of the night, several in a row. And he's always talking to somebody and doing an interview or at a microphone outside a trial. It's really hard to keep track of everything that he is uttering and that he is saying, and then to quantify what's the most important thing to kind of write about and cover. And now, let's be honest, and this is one of the reasons I want to talk to you about, if when we see him talking or hear him talking, if he sounds, cognitively all there, and we can talk about obviously Joe Biden too, but how do you do it? How do you cover it? And how do you know which stories, utterances to write about?
It's a good question, and it's one that I struggle with a lot. And that is, to what degree are you just simply amplifying his douchebaggery? And to what degree are you actually sort of using some light of attention as a disinfectant? And I always sort of, like, his flat insults of rando people don't really, we try not to cover, I try not to cover. But when he does something that sort of flouts the sort of gag order of a judge or crosses a real line or says that even when he has crossed the line, he should still get immunity.
Yeah,
I do think that, I hate to sound like self-promotional, but journalists, I don't consider myself a journalist, but people that cover this sort of stuff, it's the first draft of history, right? And a lot of people, Trump came to power because I think reasonable people didn't take him seriously and ignored him. And I think that's the worst possible thing. I think we need to be well aware of the crazy, the hyperbole, the dangerous rhetoric that I don't think he truly believes, but that's almost apart from the issue. He's got sort of fanatic followers that take him verbatim. And that's the social anthropology that we need to track so that the world understands that there's a lot of isolated, sad people who are seeing him fill a role in their lives that is completely bonkers and devoid of reason. And you have people literally saying, I think it's time we could use a dictator. What?
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Or if they're not saying it.
I think I try to at least find something that's legitimately newsworthy, that advances the story of Trump's dissension into crazy and cultish sort of fascism one step at a time. And do I do more harm than good? Gee, I hope not, but it's something that I think and worry about all the time.
Oh, I think you, are a journalist, and I think you do a lot more good than harm. I mean, I appreciate and respect the fact that you do struggle with how to cover it. And it's the perfect answer. It's a nuanced answer as to choosing what things to cover and how to write about them, including this piece that you have about Donald Trump's gaffes and slurring. It's titled "Trump's Gaffes and Slurring This Weekend Should Be Leading Every Newscast. Why aren't they?" It's, of course, your take on it, your opinion on it, but I'm going to read from it, and I'm going to read from it very effectively. I'm going to read your words, but you'll see how good I am at performing your words with probably the perfect inflection on each word. Watch this.
Good.
This is really well written, too, of course, so it makes it easy. Former President Donald Trump looks more likely than ever before to secure the Republican nomination for the 2024 presidential election. But on the same weekend he effectively sealed up his bid, he threw up a series of gaffes, slurred words, and bizarre analogies that are deserving of media coverage. Apart from some outliers, they are largely being ignored. The American electorate, Colby Hall writes, in case somebody just tuned in, I don't know that happens in podcasts, but in radio we used to do that, is about to face the choice of an 81-year-old incumbent, President Joe Biden, whose occasional stutters, stiffening gait, and notable lack of press availabilities have only fueled negative coverage of his geriatric candidacy. I've written before that it's not always ageist to cover Biden's experience and the benefits and challenges that come with it, but Trump will be 78 when voters take to the polls in November, while he's mostly been sharp and lucid during rallies and friendly media appearances. This past weekend told a different story. The former president made a series of flubs and missteps and serious minds should want to know about, and yet his stumbles are barely getting covered on cable news. Of why it's not being covered, Colby, or in your opinion, appropriately?
Well, so first of all, I think you have to look across the cable news dollar. I think if you're seeking the coverage, you can find it on Mediaite, on the Daily Beast, on a lot of so it is being covered in some respects. I happen to believe, I am of the mind that sort of in the dearth of political leadership in D.C., cable news opinion hosts have filled the vacuum. And the cable news opinion hosts have largely, they're more concerned with ratings and sort of the lucrative nature, and they largely are not, they don't need to abide by any journalistic standards. Fox News is the 800-pound gorilla. I've written about this, they've made very clear that they don't have any interest in covering anything that's negative about Trump for fear of losing an audience that's increasingly super important to the Murdoch empire.
Where and how have they made that clear, that they don't have any interest in covering negative things about Trump? Where and how?
Just judging by the, I mean, it's almost embarrassing to reveal how many times I've written posts that say, this crazy thing happened and it's barely been covered on Fox News. And largely it's Trump, right? And so I think cited William Greider's famous book title, Who Will Tell the People? Who will tell the people? The Fox News viewers, which is 50%,
right,
over 50% of the cable news viewership, that Trump is effectively been charged with stealing classified documents, undermining election in our democracy. You're not hearing that. Yeah, Brett Baer will mention it in 25 minutes or 25-second report on Special Report, but it's not being covered. So half of the cable news spectrum is Fox News viewers is just pretending that they're whistling past the graveyard. Right? I think MSNBC is focused more on policies. I think they're less likely to. Yes, there is some coverage of Trump's gaffes, especially on Morning Joe. I will say they've been covering this for a long time, but covering Trump's missteps and gaffes sort of hangs a lantern on Biden's own sort of, vulnerability when it comes to age. And I think CNN still suffers from this concern that they'll be biased. They don't quite know how to cover Trump because they were so vilified under Jeff Zucker for, giving him so much attention. Yeah. And the pendulum swung the other way. So they cover Trump with arm's length. They won't show the rallies, reasonably so. But it wasn't just him. The clip last weekend of him mistaking Nikki Haley for Nancy Pelosi is tough to watch. He really, he was confused on a number of levels, and it was really hard to see. And that was but one example.
The thing, I just never know what to think as a performer, as a comedian, as someone who understands the pressure of being live in front of people. There's so much pressure to speak well and effectively. And it's very common for politicians to make mistakes, misspeak, say the wrong name, and worse, and just get things wrong and sound stupid, of course. But at some point, it does seem, and it's kind of a bias there when you're watching someone when they are that much older. And Joe Biden, I think, looks older than Donald Trump, and that's because Donald Trump paints himself literally and his hair to some extent. And I think that sometimes we don't know. We're not psychologists and we're not doctors. We don't know. But it seems I've been the only way defending Trump on this. I don't think he's always misspeaking. I don't think he got that wrong. I think he's doing some of that on purpose and so on. But now I read that article, yours, and saw the more context and how often it's happening. And sometimes it seems like he doesn't get his nap or he's not on the right medication or something.
Well, something's up. Right. And I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, and I don't like when people, try to,
say he had syphilis on his hand.
I want to diagnose. I'm sorry?
I thought you were about to say when, what's his name, said he had syphilis on his hand. Oh,
right. I mean, diagnosing someone from afar is a dangerous practice.
Ethically wrong. Yeah.
Largely mockable. Yeah. I will say, the Nikki Haley Pelosi confusion was just but one example. He, also talked about how forts defeated the world wars. I can't even remember how he mispronounced Elise Stefanik's last name. And she's like the lead VP candidate. Couldn't get her name right. He made this weird tortured metaphor in arguing for immunity that it's like a rogue cop or a pedophile priest. Like how is that? And so I think, to your point, public speakers public speak, and they put themselves out a lot. And there's a reason why they're on prompter and they're heavily scripted so that they say that. And Trump's a Borscht Belt hacky comedian who loves to go off script, and he's a he's a very good entertainer. I mean, apart from the fascist sort of crazy stuff, like he can command a room. He's charming and witty and lucid. But when he goes off script, he gets, and when we see that real side, we should be like, check, please. This guy's not ready for prime time. And so now we have, choose your fighter, more the sort of walking cadaver versus the sort of dangerous dictator that's destroying democracy. Like that's really the best we got right now and I think Biden's been an effective president for 4 years, but brother's old, and
I think they should keep Joe Biden.
He's not going to go away with time.
I think they should keep Joe Biden with the glasses on, all wrapped up. I don't want to hear him speak because here's the thing. I'm old enough to remember Barack Obama's primetime speech on healthcare, press conference, took questions on healthcare in the East Room. It was all about healthcare. That was the focus. That was the driving the week. It was the White House trying to control the story.
It was a big fucking deal.
It was a big fucking deal when it passed. And Barack Obama said something about that Cambridge cop arresting Skip Gates. And the whole message was lost. That wasn't a gaffe. That was Obama answering a reporter's question, and they lost the thread. My point being, if Joe Biden goes out and makes an almost perfect speech or a pretty good speech, but he says something, a real questionable thing that you're not sure he's all there, that's all we'll talk about. So if the White House and the campaign want to put him out there more, the question always has to be, what if he says something or does something that makes him look old or not all there, and then they lose the whole day or the whole week or weeks the way that
the truth is, if you watch a little bit of Fox News, like every hour of every day on that network is dedicated to one message, and that is Joe Biden is a horrible president. Crime is out of control. The economy is really, really bad, and we're being invaded by people from South America. And, I do think that there's a crisis at the border that we need to figure out who we are as a country. Are we still America or a different version of America? But the economy isn't nearly as bad. Crime isn't nearly as bad. But it doesn't matter. The truth doesn't matter if all you do is if you just purely for partisan attacks. And that's the very dangerous state of the political media landscape or environment that we find ourselves.
Isn't Fox News just like Tim Scott in that they are going to continue to praise Trump and give him amazing coverage, even though he's shitting on them? He just went off on Fox News and said, I don't know why anybody watched, just maybe 2 days ago, but Fox is going to continue to praise him. And then, of course, I just want you to talk about this whole Tim Scott thing, because you covered that at Mediaite today, because the crew at Morning Joe was just, they couldn't contain their disgust, you said. But I mean, there is a parallel between how Fox News is treating Donald Trump and how Tim Scott is treating Donald Trump.
Tim Scott is the largest supplicant of the whole lot, but a long line of supplicants. Right?
Yeah, so gross.
The Morning Joe thing is kind of funny because Joe Scarborough says, like, my God, who is Tim Scott? And you can hear Willie Geist and Mika Brzezinski in the background, just like, they can't control. They're like, oh, like they literally are so reviled. And it's really, really tough. I think Tim Scott is vying for vice president, and the fact that he was stationed right behind Trump during the speech with his sort of silly, like sort of happy face. He's in the Senate because Nikki Haley appointed him. And, Trump was like, you must really hate Nikki if you're endorsing me. And, he said, like, no, I just love you so much. Like, dude, where is your pride? The weird thing about Fox News, and I think it's a fairly obvious thing, it's like sort of an abusive relationship where Trump is like, Fox can't give me a fair shake. And then they grovel. Like, he said that after he had been interviewed by Lawrence Jones, Martha McCallum, Brett Baer, Brian Kilmeade. Brian Kilmeade toured his Air Trump One, and literally his first question was like, have you lost weight? Like the most supplicating question. No, it's like, I haven't seen you in a while. Wow, you've lost a lot of weight. Like, bruh, come on. Like, is it really? And so he's like, he's negging them. Do you remember that dating book by ? Whatever, the idea that like, if you want someone to like be nice to you, criticize them, neg them, and then they'll be like, he's totally, that's a good idea for a column, actually.
There you go.
He's negging Fox News, and then Fox News is totally taking the bait.
Yes, please write it up. Please write it up. And because it's exactly what is happening. And getting to that piece I mentioned, I teased. Anal sex, are you behind it? Question mark. You wrote these words, or somebody did, the headline at Mediaite. Anal sex, are you behind it? Quote, Trump posts Jon Carroll's sex column in an effort to undermine defamation case. He's out there defaming her in every platform. They're going to fine him so much more money. They're going to punish him so much harder this time in this case.
It reveals his strategy, right? Like, he's like, the only thing he knows that he's guilty or liable for sexual assault and defamation. And so he's doubling, tripling, quadrupling down, and he's begging for more punishment because the truth doesn't matter to him.
Yeah.
What he can say is his message is like, aha, see, they're like fining me now $20 million, missing the point that like he's already been found liable for defamation. And I think when I posted that, so Jon Carroll wrote a sex column for Elle, and she tweeted a lot of questions promoting her sex column for Elle, one of which was about anal sex and a bunch of other stuff. And he used that, like, see how crazy she is? Like, well, no, she's a sex columnist, and that's sort of what she did. And so, again, he's trying to campaign from the courtroom. I think it will work for the 28% of America that buys his bullshit.
I know.
I think the big takeaway from Tuesday night is that there's a huge, much bigger split within the GOP. There's a sizable percentage of Republican voters who will never vote for Trump. And I think, is it 10%? Is it 30%? 35% of New Hampshire Republicans said they would never vote for Trump. New Hampshire is different from the rest of the country. But I don't see how he can win the general election if
I feel like
number proves to be true.
I'm glad you said that. I feel like a lot of people are hesitating on taking too much away from that statistic because they don't want to be wrong. Credibility.
I'm often wrong, and the last thing that anyone could do is pretend as though like, oh, it's sewn up, because we've seen how that works out. New Hampshire is live free or die, very independent. It's an outlier. It's not like the rest of the country. That said, there is the GOP civil war has been happening for a long time. And even Trump was saying like Nikki Haley will never get MAGA. You know who loves that message is Joe Biden, because Joe Biden really benefits from the split. Yeah. The only candidate that Biden can really beat is Trump. So the White House is delighting in the fact that it appears that Trump is, I'm saying pretty obvious stuff, but that Trump is the nominee. So I just think it's such a fail. It just really shows the insular media political bubble that we've created surrounding both parties, that the best that we can do are these two guys. And I think Biden's a respectable guy who got a lot accomplished in his first term. That said, I don't think he's the best candidate the Democrats can put forth right now.
Well, it was up to him, I guess, to run again. I mean, he could have been the greatest. He could have been the greatest president of our lifetime, and maybe he still will be. Who knows? But like these 4 years and in terms of what he accomplished, in terms of what he rebounded from, with how many people were dying of COVID, the vaccination efforts, and the economy, obviously, not to mention juggling all these horrifically challenging foreign policy issues, passing this Green New Deal. I mean, the environmentalists are really, like me, are pretty excited about what he's doing. Even more news today.
He got a lot accomplished and a lot of infrastructure stuff that will benefit for a long time. I think his biggest mistake was that he didn't get ahead of the border issues in a way that made sense politically. He was hamstrung by an obstructionist Congress, and the media on the right was always going to hit him for that. I kind of wish that they'd just been a little bit more on the front foot on that, but live and learn.
Colby Hall, I love talking to you. I love reading you, and I hate to have to end it, but I really appreciate your time, man. As always, thank you very much for joining me. That was awesome.
I enjoy it. Yeah, I'll come do this anytime. It's one of my favorite things.
Well, there you have it, everybody. That is all I've got for you on today's show. I will have a great conversation with Christian Finnegan and Ophira Eisenberg tomorrow. Very excited to share that with you and more, of course, next week. Let me know who you want to hear on the show. Thank you so much for your support. I hope to see you in Las Vegas. If you haven't gotten your tickets, go to the link in the show notes and learn more. I know a lot of people have questions about what else is going to happen, and we'll be rolling all those details out real soon. Thank you so much for your support, your love, your patience, your kindness, your generosity, and all of it. That's it. That's all I've got. I'm going to be done talking now. Jon Carroll will sing us out as he always does, and in Vegas. Can't wait.
I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know us right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. Point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for loss, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change would begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We got to let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right. We got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.